Hello and welcome to another Todd Talk where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. Today's topic is going to be inquiry-based learning. So the first thing we should do is define what inquiry-based learning is. So a simple definition of inquiry-based learning, as you see here, is a way of teaching and learning that is primarily student-directed. Students explore, investigate, research, study, and pursue topics based on curiosity to increase their understanding of the world. Basically, what inquiry-based learning in a nutshell is learning for learning's sake. So you're not learning because you've broken something down and students are told to learn something because they'll have to know it later on. This is something they are genuinely interested in, something that motivates them, something that excites them. So that in a nutshell is what inquiry-based learning is. Inquiry-based learning follows this 5-step cycle. So at the beginning, you are asking questions, or you're asking students to ask questions, actually. So this is very student-centered. So you may start out with an essential question, but your students are then going to generate the questions that follow. And anything that pops into their mind, as crazy as it might sound, it is fair game for inquiry-based learning. And sometimes they need some help in focusing some of their questions, but for the most part, you let students be as creative and brainstorm as much as they want. So once they ask those questions, then they have to investigate the answers to those questions. So if they pose a question such as, why do black holes suck in light? Then they would do research on that, and they would try to investigate why that is and what the scientific theory behind that is. So once they've investigated and created some research that they can base their inquiry on, then it's the creating phase. And here's where they create something. They either experiment with something, they have a performance where they're presenting or something like that, but they are creating a product to show what they have learned from the inquiry-based learning. After that, they would discuss. So it is important that this is a collaborative type of learning. So discussion is really important. And so you may have to train your students on how to discuss and how to run a discussion and what that looks like. And the final step, and probably one of the most important steps that often gets neglected, is the reflection phase. The reflection phase is where students really think about, what did I truly learn from working on this inquiry-based project? What was it that I got from it? What were my takeaways? And it's interesting because in inquiry-based learning, as in any learning, students may be learning something differently than what you intended. So you may intend for a student to learn about black holes, but what the student really learned is that they need to work on their time management because they ran out of time to produce the product that they wanted to. That's an important lesson to learn. So the reflection is a safe space where students can feel as though they can share what it is or reflect upon what it is that they learned. So what are the characteristics of inquiry-based learning? So one of those characteristics is finding the truth. So you have gotten to the point where students can ask questions to arrive at a truth. This is known as the Socratic method, where you ask so many questions that you go down a certain path, and by exploring those questions, you are going to arrive at a truth. Working with others is really important. So inquiry-based learning at its heart is collaborative learning. So learning to work with others, which is a valuable 21st century skill. And you can see the others there, but the one other one I want to talk about is solving problems. So being a problem solver is also a 21st century skill. So being able to figure out ways to solve problems yourself without having to rely on a teacher to guide you to those problems is a really important skill to learn, not just for high school students, but for elementary students for that matter. We want to create independent learners, and that's what inquiry-based learning really allows for. It's kind of equally important to know what inquiry-based learning is not. It is not a free-for-all where students make every single decision. The one thing for this theory to go into practice, you as the teacher will have to provide structure. And students should know what this structure looks like. And even though it is a loose structure and it is allowing the students to call a lot of the shots, the structure is still there. So they know that something is keeping them on the road of where they need to go. It's never passive. So with students directing, you should never be the teacher in front of the classroom doing most of the talking. I always say you should not be working harder than your students. And inquiry-based learning is a perfect example of that, where the students are doing the heavy lifting. They're the ones who have to do the learning. The last thing in this that I want to touch on, and this is an important one, is the teacher as expert. Uh, One thing you have to do with inquiry-based learning is let go of your desire to be in charge or to be the source of all knowledge. You have to really give kids a chance to explore and some room to make mistakes in that regard. So you have to swallow your pride a little bit and be humble as the teacher. And you're not really the teacher anymore. You're kind of the facilitator. You are helping to guide them where they need to go, but they are doing the teaching themselves. The advantages to inquiry-based learning are many, but a couple that I want to point out is an empower student voice and honors their choice. So when you can put students at the front of their educational decisions, there's going to be so much more buy-in because they feel like they had a say in it. As a result of this student choice, they're going to have increased motivation. And because there's increased motivation, there's increased engagement. And who wouldn't want that in their classroom? Who wouldn't want an engaged group of students who are motivated? It teaches valuable 21st century skills like grit and perseverance and a growth mindset and self-regulation, all things that we would want any child to leave our classroom with. And this is a good opportunity for that to happen. And the last one is it enables students to take ownership over their own learning. So they learn for learning's sake. They can leave your classroom and learn anything they want to because of what you've allowed them to do with the inquiry-based learning. So they don't need someone to tell them what to do. They can take the initiative and own their own learning, which is really important. So some ideas for inquiry-based learning. So you see here things such as, we are asking questions. What will I create? What will I learn? This is a really important one. What do I love? So try, as much as possible, try to match inquiry-based learning with things that students are genuinely excited about. They may not be excited about the American Revolution if you're teaching the American Revolution, but you can allow them to have a product that involves creating a website, which they are excited about. And so you can tap into the excitement and the love that they have of learning. So they're learning how to create a website, and at the same time, they're learning about the American Revolution, which is what you want them to do. How can you make an impact? So that's another big idea for students, where how they are not just creating widgets on an assembly line. They are creating their own knowledge and their own learning. And so how can they take that knowledge and learning and how can they impact others with that? How can they make a difference? A lot of times students produce work, they turn it in, it gets graded, it gets turned back, it gets put on the refrigerator, thrown away, and that's the end of it. Well, what if what they did actually changed a law or, changed something about the school, like the healthiness of the school cafeteria lunches because someone was inquiring about that. So there are lots of things that you can do with inquiry-based learning in that regard. There are a spectrum of inquiry. And so when you start at a structured inquiry, this is probably the most rigid of the inquiry, where the teacher is still in the lead, and they do inquiry together. This is a good place to start when you are practicing your inquiry-based learning. And then eventually you scale it down to controlled inquiry, where the teacher may choose the main topics, the essential questions, things of that nature, but the students are going to be the ones answering the questions. The teacher may in this also provide ideas for a product. In the guided inquiry, the teacher is kind of there, but they're starting to fade into the background a little bit more. They may choose the essential question, but it's the students who are creating the solution and designing products themselves. And then on the other end of the spectrum is free inquiry, where students not only are creating the product and the problems, but they also choose their topics. And this would be like Genius Hour is a good example of this, where students explore something that they want to know more about. All of the inquiry-based learning falls under the chart. So when I talk about practice of inquiry-based learning breaks down into many areas, but three of the major ones are project-based learning, problem-based learning, and case-based learning. The Todd Talks that will follow this one will focus on each one of those and show how what those can look like in the classroom and how you would go about doing that. These are all under the umbrella of collaborative learning. So in all of these types of inquiry-based learning, students are learning how to work together. And I will have another series of Todd Talks that have to do with collaboration and teaching students how to work in groups. But that, in essence, is inquiry-based learning. If you're interested in knowing more about inquiry-based learning than what was shared in this video, you can check out this book, Authentic Learning.